wretchedness, as we have said, but likewise of the greatness and excellence of God. For as well as quenching the desires and pleasures and attachments of sin, he cleanses and frees the understanding, that it may understand the truth. For pleasure of sense and desire, even though it be for spiritual things, darkens and obstructs the spirit, and furthermore, that narrowness and aridity of sense enlightens and quickens the understanding, as says Isaiah. Vexation makes us to understand how the soul that is empty and disencumbered, as is necessary for his divine influence, is instructed supernaturally by God in his divine wisdom, through this dark and arid night of contemplation, as we have said. And this instruction God did not give in those first sweetnesses and joys. This is very well explained by the same prophet Isaiah, where he says, "Whom shall God teach his knowledge, and whom shall he make to understand the hearing? To those, he says, that are weaned from the milk, and drawn away from the breasts." Here it is shown that the first milk of spiritual sweetness is no preparation for this divine influence, neither is there preparation in attachment to the breast of delectable meditations, belonging to the faculties of sense, which gave the soul pleasure. Such preparation consists rather in the lack of the one and the withdrawal of the other. Inasmuch as, in order to listen to God, the soul needs to stand upright and to be detached with regard to affection and sense, even as the prophet says concerning himself in these words, "I will stand upon my watch." This is that detachment of desire. "And I will make firm my step." That is, I will not meditate with sense. In order to contemplate, that is, in order to understand that which may come to me from God. So we have now arrived at this, that from this arid night there first of all comes self-knowledge, whence, as from a foundation, rises this other knowledge of God. For which cause St. Augustine said to God, "Let me know myself, Lord, and I shall know you." For as the philosophers say, one extreme can be well known by another. And in order to prove more completely how efficacious is this night of sense, with its aridity and its desolation, in bringing the soul that light which, as we say, it receives there from God, we shall quote that passage of David, wherein he clearly describes the great power which is in this night for bringing the soul this lofty knowledge of God. He says then, thus, "In the desert land, waterless, dry, and pathless, I appeared before you, that I might see your virtue and your glory." It is a wondrous thing that David should say here that the means and the preparation for his knowledge of the glory of God were not the spiritual delights and the many pleasures which he had experienced, but the aridities and detachments of his sensual nature, which is here to be understood by the dry and desert land. No less wondrous is it that he should describe as the road to his perception and vision of the virtue of God, not the divine meditations and conceptions of which he had often made use, but his being unable to form any conception of God, or to walk by meditation produced by imaginary considerations, which is here to be understood by the pathless land. So that the means to a knowledge of God and of oneself is this dark night with its aridities and voids, although it leads not to a knowledge of him with the same plenitude and abundance that comes from the other night of the spirit, since this is only, as it were, the beginning of the other. Likewise, from the aridities and voids of this night of the desire, the soul draws spiritual humility, which is the contrary virtue to the first sin, which, as we said, is spiritual pride. Through this humility, which is acquired by the said knowledge of self, the soul is purged from all those imperfections whereinto it fell with respect to that capital sin of pride, in the time of its prosperity. For it sees itself so dry and miserable that the idea never even occurs to it that it is making better progress than others, or outstripping them, as it believed itself to be doing before. On the contrary, it recognizes that others are making better progress than itself. And hence arises the love of its neighbors, for it esteems them, and does not judge them as it was wont to do beforetime, when it saw that itself had great fervor, and others did not. It is aware only of its own wretchedness, which it keeps before its eyes to such an extent that it never forgets it, nor takes occasion to set its eyes on any one else. This was described wonderfully by David when he was in this night, in these words, I was dumb, and was humbled, and kept silence from good things, and my sorrow was renewed. This he says because it seemed to him that the good that was in his soul had so completely departed, that not only did he neither speak nor find any language concerning it, but with respect to the good of others, he was likewise dumb, because of his grief at the knowledge of his misery. In this condition, again, souls become submissive and obedient upon the spiritual road. For when they see their own misery, not only do they hear what is taught them, but they even desire that any one whatsoever may set them on the way, and tell them what they should do. The effect of presumption, which they sometimes had in their prosperity, is taken from them. And finally, there are swept away from them on this road all the other imperfections which we noted above, with respect to this first sin, which is that of spiritual pride. End of chapter 12 of Book 1.